The smoke from the burned letter still curled between her fingers when Pierce Callahan rode into the clearing behind his barn. And the sight of a woman crouching in the dirt with tears streaming down her face made him pull his horse up short. She looked up at him with eyes the color of storm clouds, her blonde hair falling loose from its pins, ash smudged across her cheek. In her trembling hand, she held the last corner of what had been a letter, the edges black and still smoking. The rest lay in charred fragments at her feet. "Madam." Pierce dismounted slowly, careful not to startle her. He was a tall man of 28, broad-shouldered from years of ranching in the Nevada high desert, and he knew his size could be intimidating. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but fresh tears spilled over. "It was my only way home," she whispered, staring at the burned remnants. "I had the address. I had finally remembered the street name after all these years, and I wrote it down. I was going to leave tomorrow, and now—" Her voice broke completely. Pierce looked at the smoking paper, then at the woman who seemed so utterly lost. Behind them, his ranch house stood solid against the spring sky of 1882, the land stretching out toward the distant mountains that ringed Hawthorne, Nevada. He had come out here to check on a fence post and instead found a mystery on his own property. "How did it catch fire?" he asked gently, crouching down a few feet away from her. "The wind," she said, her voice hollow. I was reading it one more time, making sure I had memorized it, and a gust came up. It blew the paper right into the lantern I had set on the ground. I tried to save it, but it burned so fast. She opened her hand and the last corner disintegrated into ash. "Now it's gone, all of it." Pierce studied her carefully. She wore a simple cotton dress, dusty from travel, and no wedding ring. Her hands were soft but not pampered, the hands of someone who worked but not at hard labor. "What's your name?" Rose Parker." She wiped at her face with the back of her hand, smearing the ash. "I've been working at the boarding house in town for the past 3 months, Mrs. Henderson's place." He knew it. A respectable establishment where single women could rent rooms and take their meals. And this letter. It had your home address, my family's address, in Sacramento. Rose took a shuddering breath. "I was 7 years old when we left California. My father moved us to Virginia City when he heard about the Comstock silver. We were only supposed to stay a year, but then he got sick and died, and my mother had to work. She took in laundry and I helped her. We barely scraped by." Pierce listened, watching the emotions play across her face as she spoke. "When I was 12, my mother got a letter from her sister in Sacramento. My aunt wanted us to come live with her. She had married well, had a big house, and she said there was room for us. But my mother was proud. She didn't want to arrive like beggars. She said we would save money first, go back with our heads high." Rose's voice grew bitter. "It took years, 6 more years of washing other people's clothes, but finally last fall we had enough. My mother wrote to her sister and we got a letter back with the address and an invitation." "What happened?" Pierce asked, though he could already guess part of it. "My mother died." Rose's words were flat. 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave. There was an influenza outbreak in Virginia City. She caught it and was gone in 4 days. I could not think straight. I buried her, sold everything we had, and I just started traveling. I was not even sure where I was going. I ended up here in Hawthorne because my money ran out and I needed work. But you had the letter with the address." "I thought I did. I had kept it so carefully all those months. But last week, when I finally felt ready to think about the future again, I looked for it and it was gone. I must have lost it somewhere during my travels. Everything from that time is a blur." She looked at him with desperate eyes. "But I had written down the address a few days ago." I finally remembered the street name. It came to me in a dream. My aunt's house was on Riverside Drive in Sacramento, I was sure of it. I wrote it down immediately, and that was the letter I just burned. Pierce felt a weight settle in his chest. The woman had lost everything, had finally found a thread to pull herself forward, and now that was gone too. Riverside Drive is a long street, he said quietly. Sacramento is not a small town. I know. Rose's shoulders sagged. Without a house number, I will never find them. My aunt's married name is different from my mother's maiden name. I cannot even remember it clearly. It has been so many years. I was 7 years old. What 7-year-old pays attention to things like that? They sat in silence for a moment, the Nevada wind blowing across the high desert. Hawthorne sat at over 4,000 feet elevation, and even in April the mornings carried a chill. Pierce could see Rose shivering, though he suspected it was not entirely from cold. "Why were you out here behind my barn?" he asked. She flushed. "I was walking. I walk when I need to think." "I did not realize I had wandered onto someone's property. I sat down to read the address one more time, and I set the lantern down without thinking. I am sorry. I will leave now. Wait." Pierce stood and offered her his hand. After a moment she took it and he pulled her to her feet. "Come up to the house. You need to wash your face and warm up. Then we can figure out what to do." "There is nothing to do," Rose said, but she followed him anyway. The ranch house was neat and spare, the home of a man who lived alone and kept things practical. Pierce led Rose to the kitchen and pumped water into a basin for her. She washed her face and hands while he stoked the fire in the stove and put coffee on to heat. "When did you plan to leave for Sacramento?" he asked, setting 2 cups on the table. "Tomorrow morning." "There is a stage that goes west. I have been saving my wages from the boarding house." Rose sat down heavily in one of the wooden chairs. "But what is the point now?" "I would just be wandering up and down Riverside Drive, knocking on doors, asking if anyone knows a woman whose sister died in Virginia City. Even if I found them, they might not believe me. I have no proof of who I am. My mother's few papers burned in the fire at our boarding house room last year. That was another reason I kept the letter so carefully. It was proof." Pierce poured the coffee and sat across from her. In the better light of the kitchen, he could see she was probably 23 or 24, with a face that would be pretty when it was not drawn with grief. There was something in her eyes that pulled at him, a determination not to break even when everything had broken around her. "Tell me everything you remember about your aunt," he said. "Not her name, everything else." Rose blinked. "Why?" "Because maybe we can piece together enough information to find her. You remember the street. That is a start. What else?" She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup and thought. "My uncle was a banker. I remember my mother saying that in her letter. She was impressed because we had never known anyone who worked in a bank before. That helps. How many banks can there be in Sacramento? If we can find out which bankers live on Riverside Drive, we narrow it down." Hope flickered in Rose's eyes. "Do you think that would work?" "It might." "What else?" "They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The girl's name was Charlotte. I remember that because I thought it was so elegant." Rose leaned forward. "And my aunt had red hair, very red. My mother used to say she got all the Irish fire in the family." Pierce felt a smile tug at his mouth. A red-haired banker's wife named something Irish, living on Riverside Drive in Sacramento, with 3 children including a daughter named Charlotte. That is a lot more than just a street name. "But how do we find out about the bankers?" Rose asked. "Telegraph. I can send inquiries to banks in Sacramento, ask about their employees who live on Riverside Drive. It might take a few days, but we can get answers." "I cannot pay you for that," Rose said quickly. "The telegraph costs money, and I have been saving every penny for the stage fare." "I am not asking you to pay me." Pierce met her eyes. Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better. You can pay me back when you are settled with your aunt." She studied him for a long moment. "Why would you help me? You do not know me." It was a fair question. Pierce thought about how to answer. "My mother died when I was 16, he said finally. "My father had already been gone for years. I inherited this ranch from an uncle who took me in. If he had not helped me when I needed it, I would have ended up on the streets. Maybe that makes me understand a little of what you are going through." Rose's eyes softened. "I am sorry about your mother." "It was a long time ago." Pierce stood. "Come on. Let me take you back to town and we will get those telegrams sent today. The sooner we start asking questions, the sooner we get you home." The ride into Hawthorne took 20 minutes, with Rose sitting carefully on the saddle behind him. Pierce could feel her tension, the way she held herself apart even though the horse's gait required her to lean against him. She was proper and cautious, and he respected that. Hawthorne was a small town, one of the many that had sprung up in Nevada to serve the mining industry. It sat near Walker Lake, and the lake gave the high desert an oasis feeling that Pierce had always appreciated. The town had a main street with the usual establishments: general store, saloon, boarding house, telegraph office, church, and not much else. Most people who lived here worked the ranches or the smaller mines in the area. The telegraph office was run by a man named Samuel Cross, who had been in Hawthorne for 30 years and knew everyone's business. He looked up with interest when Pierce walked in with Rose. "Need to send some telegrams," Pierce said, before Samuel could start asking questions. "To banks in Sacramento. I need to find out which of their employees live on Riverside Drive." Samuel's eyebrows rose. "That is going to take several telegrams. Sacramento has at least a dozen banks. Then we send a dozen telegrams. Can you look up the addresses for the main ones?" "I have a directory here somewhere." Samuel rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a thin book. "Let us see. Bank of Sacramento, California Savings and Loan, First National Pacific Bank." He rattled off names while writing them down. Pierce composed a simple message. "Request information on employees residing Riverside Drive. Stop, specifically seeking family with 3 children, daughter named Charlotte. Stop, urgent family matter. Stop, reply to Pierce, Callahan, Hawthorne, Nevada. Stop." They sent 12 telegrams in all. The cost made Rose wince, but Pierce paid without comment. When they stepped back outside, she turned to him. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "This is more kindness than I have any right to expect." "You have every right to expect people to help you when you need it," Pierce said. "That is how the world should work." She smiled at that, a small, tentative expression that transformed her face. "Is that how it does work in your experience?" "Not often enough," he admitted, "but I am trying to do my part." He took her back to the boarding house where Mrs. Henderson stood on the porch with her arms crossed. She was a stout woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and a sharp eye. "Rose Parker, where have you been? You missed helping with breakfast." "I apologize, Mrs. Henderson." Rose climbed down from the horse. "I had an accident this morning. Mr. Callahan helped me." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened slightly. "Are you all right?" "I am fine. I will make up the work this afternoon. See that you do." Mrs. Henderson glanced at Pierce with curiosity but did not ask questions. She was a good woman despite her stern demeanor, and she ran the boarding house with fairness. Pierce touched his hat brim. "Miss Parker, I will let you know as soon as we hear anything from Sacramento." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." Rose met his eyes and something passed between them, a connection formed by shared loss and tentative hope. He rode back to the ranch with his thoughts full of a woman he had just met, a woman whose tears and determination had somehow worked their way under his skin in the span of a few hours. The ranch demanded his attention for the rest of the day. Pierce had 2 hired hands who helped with the cattle and horses, but as the owner, he worked alongside them. They were preparing for the spring roundup, when they would gather the cattle that had ranged across the winter and brand the new calves. It was hard work, but Pierce loved it. The land made sense to him in a way that people often did not. But today, he found his mind wandering back to Rose Parker and her burned letter. He wondered what it felt like to have your last connection to family literally turn to ash in your hands. The more he thought about it, the more determined he became to help her find her aunt. 3 days passed with no response from Sacramento. Pierce went into town each afternoon to check with Samuel at the telegraph office, and each time the answer was the same: nothing yet. On the 4th day, he arrived to find Samuel holding 3 telegram papers. "Got some responses," Samuel said, handing them over. "Not sure if any of them are what you need." Pierce read through them quickly. 2 were negative, banks saying none of their employees lived on Riverside Drive. The 3rd was more promising. Henry Morrison, senior loan officer, resides Riverside Drive with wife and children. Stop, wife, maiden name Murphy. Stop, can provide details if needed. Stop, Murphy, Pierce said aloud. Irish name. Rose said her mother's family was Irish. "Does that mean you found who you were looking for?" Samuel asked. "Maybe. Send a reply to this one. I need the house number and first name of the wife." Samuel wrote it down and sent the telegram. The response came back within 2 hours. Morrison residence, 247 Riverside Drive. Stop, wife name Margaret. Stop, 3 children: Charlotte age 18, William age 16, Robert age 13. Stop, Pierce stared at the paper. Charlotte. Margaret Murphy, married to Henry Morrison. It had to be right. He rode straight to the boarding house and asked Mrs. Henderson if he could speak with Rose. She called her down from upstairs, and Rose appeared on the porch with flour on her apron and hope in her eyes. "Did you hear something? I think I found your aunt." He handed her the telegram. "Does this sound right?" Rose read it once, then again. Her hands started to shake. "Margaret, that was her name. I could not remember it, but now that I see it, I know it is right. And Charlotte." She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face again, but these were different from the ones she had shed 4 days ago. These were tears of relief and joy. "You found them. Oh God, Pierce, you found my family." It was the first time she had used his given name, and something about hearing it in her voice made his chest tighten. "We found them together," he said. "Now you can go home." But instead of looking happy, Rose's face crumpled. "I cannot believe this is real. After everything, after losing the letter and thinking it was all over, you did this. You barely know me and you did this." "Rose." Pierce stepped closer, and without thinking, he reached out and took her hands. "You deserve this. You deserve to find your family and have a home again." She squeezed his hands hard, holding on like he was the only solid thing in her world. Mrs. Henderson watched from the doorway with an expression that might have been approval. "When does the next stage leave for Sacramento?" Rose asked. "Day after tomorrow," Pierce said. "But I have a better idea. Let me take you there myself." "What? No, that is too much. You have already done so much. I have business I can conduct in Sacramento. Been meaning to look at some breeding stock anyway." It was not entirely a lie. He had been thinking about improving his herd. "Besides, the stage trip takes days with all the stops. I can get you there faster by wagon and it will be more comfortable." Rose hesitated. "Are you sure? That is a long journey. About 200 miles. We can make it in 5 or 6 days if the weather holds. I have made the trip before." "I do not want to impose." "You are not imposing. I am offering." Pierce smiled at her. "Unless you would rather ride the stage. No, I mean yes. I would rather travel with you if you truly do not mind." "I do not mind at all." They agreed to leave the next morning. Rose would give her notice to Mrs. Henderson, and Pierce would prepare the wagon and supplies. It would give Rose one more day to work and save the extra wages, and it would give him time to make sure everything was ready. That evening, back at the ranch, Pierce found himself more excited about the journey than he had been about anything in months. He told himself it was just because he was helping someone in need, that it was simple Christian charity. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. There was something about Rose Parker that drew him in, something beyond her pretty face or her sad story. She had a strength that appealed to him, a refusal to give up even when she had every reason to. He also knew that once he delivered her to Sacramento, to her aunt's house on Riverside Drive, he would probably never see her again. She would start her new life with her family, and he would return to his ranch and his solitary existence. The thought bothered him more than it should. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Pierce loaded the wagon with supplies: food, water, bedrolls, a canvas tarp in case of rain, and feed for the horses. He hitched up his best team, 2 strong geldings who could handle the long pull. When everything was ready, he drove into town to collect Rose. She was waiting on the porch of the boarding house with a single small trunk that held all her possessions. She wore a traveling dress of dark blue and a bonnet that shaded her face. Mrs. Henderson stood beside her, and when Pierce pulled up, the older woman surprised him by pulling Rose into a brief hug. "You take care of yourself," Mrs. Henderson said, "and write to let me know you arrived safely." "I will. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Henderson. You were a good worker and no trouble. I wish you all the best with your family." She looked at Pierce. "You watch out for her, Mr. Callahan." "I will, madam." Pierce loaded Rose's trunk and helped her up onto the wagon seat. She settled beside him with her hands folded in her lap, and he could feel her nervousness. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she said, though her voice shook slightly. They set off westward, leaving Hawthorne behind as the morning sun climbed higher. The road to Sacramento would take them through some of the most beautiful and desolate country Pierce knew. They would cross high desert, wind through mountain passes, and eventually descend into the fertile Sacramento Valley. For the first few miles, they rode in silence. Pierce focused on driving, and Rose seemed lost in her own thoughts. The wagon wheels creaked, the horses' hooves made a steady rhythm, and the wind carried the scent of sage. "Tell me about your ranch," Rose said finally. "How long have you had it?" 12 years. "My uncle left it to me when he died. Before that, I worked for him from the time I was 16. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" Pierce considered the question. "I did not know what I wanted to be when I was young. My father died when I was 10, and my mother struggled to keep us fed. When she died, too, my uncle was my only living relative. He was a hard man in some ways, but fair. He taught me everything about ranching. By the time he died, I could not imagine doing anything else." "It sounds like you loved him." "I respected him. I'm not sure love is the right word. But I am grateful to him. He gave me a future." Rose nodded slowly. "That is what I hope my aunt will do for me, give me a place to start over." "What do you want to do, once you are settled, I mean?" "I am not sure. I know how to take in laundry and mending. I can cook and clean." "Those are not exactly exciting prospects." She paused. "I used to think about teaching. When I was a girl, I loved books and learning, but my mother needed me to work, so I never got much schooling past the basics. Maybe your aunt can help you with that. If her husband is a banker, they might have connections, ways to help you get more education." "Maybe." Rose sounded doubtful. "Or maybe I am too old for that now. Most teachers start training much younger." "You are not too old," Pierce said firmly. "You cannot be more than 23 or 24. 23. And you are right, I suppose. It is just hard to imagine that kind of future when I have spent the last 10 years just trying to survive. Pierce understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. After his uncle died, he had spent years just keeping the ranch going, never thinking beyond the next season. It was only recently that he had started to think about building something larger, maybe even starting a family someday. The problem was, he had never met anyone who made him want that enough to actually do something about it. Until now, a small voice in his head whispered. He pushed it aside. They stopped for lunch beside a creek that ran cold and clear from the mountains. Pierce unhitched the horses to let them drink and graze while Rose unpacked the food she had brought. Bread, cheese, dried apples, and canteens of water. They sat on rocks beside the creek, eating and listening to the water bubble over stones. It was peaceful in a way that made conversation feel unnecessary, but Pierce found himself wanting to talk to her to learn more about her. "What was Virginia City like?" he asked. Rose's expression darkened. "Crowded, dirty. The mines ran all the time and the air always smelled of smoke and ore. We lived in a tiny room above a laundry, and in summer it was so hot I could barely breathe. But we made do. My mother was determined to save money, so we spent nothing on anything extra. Every penny went into a jar she kept hidden under a floorboard. That must have been hard." It was. Sometimes I resented it. I saw other girls my age wearing pretty dresses, going to dances, and I was always working, always saving for a future that seemed like it would never come. She looked at him. "Does that make me sound selfish?" "It makes you sound human." Rose smiled at that. "After my mother died, I found the jar. There was almost $300 in it. $300 that took us 13 years to save. I could not stop crying. All that sacrifice, and she never got to see Sacramento again." "But you will," Pierce said gently. "You will see it for both of you." "Yes." Rose straightened her shoulders. "I will, and I will make something of myself. I will make her sacrifice mean something." The determination in her voice stirred something in Pierce. He wanted to help her succeed, wanted to see her happy and settled. And he wanted to be part of that, though he did not let himself think too carefully about what that meant. They traveled for another 5 hours before stopping to make camp. Pierce had brought a tent for Rose and planned to sleep under the wagon himself. He set up the tent while Rose gathered wood for a fire, and soon they had a cheerful blaze going against the cooling evening air. Dinner was beans and bacon cooked in a skillet, along with more bread. Simple food, but it tasted good after a long day of travel. They ate as the sun set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and red. "It is beautiful," Rose said softly, watching the sunset. "I forgot how beautiful the open land can be. In Virginia City, you could barely see the sky between all the buildings and smoke." "This is my favorite time of day," Pierce said. "When the work is done and you can just sit and watch the world quiet down. Do you get lonely out on your ranch? It seems very isolated." "Sometimes, but I have my horses and cattle. My 2 ranch hands live in the bunkhouse, so I see them every day, and I go into town often enough." He paused. "I suppose I have gotten used to my own company." "That is a kind way of saying yes, you do get lonely," Pierce laughed. "Maybe so. What about you? Have you made friends in Hawthorne?" "Not really. Mrs. Henderson was kind, but she kept to herself mostly. The other girls at the boarding house were friendly enough, but I did not let myself get close to anyone. I knew I would be leaving as soon as I could." Rose drew her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. "I have been alone since my mother died. Really alone in a way I never was before. Even when we had nothing, we had each other." "You will have family again soon," Pierce said. "Your aunt and uncle and cousins." "I hope they want me," Rose said quietly. "I hope I am not just an obligation to them." "Why would they not want you? You are family." But they have not seen me since I was 7. I am a stranger to them now. What if I do not fit into their life? Pierce wanted to reassure her, but he understood her fear. Then you make a new life. You are strong enough to do that. You have already proven it. She looked at him with something like wonder. How can you be so sure about me? You have only known me for a few days. Some things you can see clearly right away, Pierce said, and he meant it. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the fire burn down to embers. Finally, Rose stood and said goodnight, disappearing into the tent. Pierce spread his bedroll under the wagon and lay down, but sleep did not come easily. His mind was full of the woman sleeping nearby, and the knowledge that each day brought them closer to the moment when he would have to say goodbye to her. The second day of travel took them up into the mountains. The road became steeper and more winding, and Pierce had to concentrate on managing the team through the rough terrain. Rose held onto the wagon seat and did not complain, though he could see the journey was tiring her. They made camp that night in a meadow surrounded by pine trees. The air was cooler here, and Pierce built a larger fire. They roasted potatoes in the coals and shared a tin of peaches Pierce had brought along. Tomorrow we should reach the highest point of the pass, Pierce said. After that, it is mostly downhill to the valley. How many more days until Sacramento? 3, maybe 4. Depends on the roads and weather. Rose nodded, staring into the fire. She had been quieter today, more withdrawn, and Pierce wondered what she was thinking about. Are you all right? He asked. I am scared, she admitted. The closer we get, the more scared I become. What if this is all a mistake? What if they do not want me? Pierce moved to sit beside her on the log they were using as a bench. Then we figure out something else. But I do not think that is going to happen. You are their family. They will want to know you. I hope you are right. I am right. He spoke with confidence he did not entirely feel, but she needed reassurance, not doubt. Rose leaned against him slightly, and Pierce held very still, not wanting to break the moment. They sat like that for a while, close enough to share warmth, watching the fire and listening to the night sounds of the forest. Pierce. Rose's voice was soft. Yes. Thank you for everything. I do not think I would have had the courage to do this without you. You would have found the courage. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. She laughed at that, a sad little sound. I do not feel strong. I feel like I am barely holding myself together. That is what strength looks like sometimes. Just holding on when everything else is falling apart. Rose turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes were luminous. You are a good man, Pierce Callahan. I am just doing what anyone would do. No, most people would have ridden past a crying woman behind their barn. You stopped. You helped. That makes you different. Pierce did not know what to say to that. He was not used to being praised, not used to someone looking at him the way Rose was looking at him now. It made him want things he had no right to want, not when she was on her way to a new life that did not include him. We should get some sleep, he said, standing abruptly. Long day tomorrow. If Rose was disappointed by his sudden withdrawal, she did not show it. She just nodded and said good night, leaving Pierce alone by the fire with his thoughts and the uncomfortable realization that he was falling for a woman he would have to give up in a few days. The third day brought them over the pass and down into the foothills. The landscape changed from pine forests to oak woodlands, and the air grew warmer and more humid. They passed small ranches and farms, signs that they were approaching more settled country. That night, they camped near a small town and ate dinner at a restaurant, a luxury after days of camp food. Rose seemed more relaxed, laughing at Pierce's stories about difficult cattle and ornery horses. He found himself trying to make her laugh more, just to see the way her face lit up when she did. After dinner, they walked through the town, which was barely more than a crossroads with a few buildings. but there was a church, and Rose stopped in front of it. My mother used to say that no matter where you were, if you could find a church, you were not completely lost, she said. I have not been to services since she died. I was too angry at God for taking her. Are you still angry? I do not know. Maybe less angry and more confused. Why does God let so much pain happen? Why did my mother have to die right before she could finally rest? Pierce did not have an answer for that. He had asked himself similar questions when his own mother died. Maybe we are not meant to understand it. Maybe we just have to trust that there is a reason, even if we cannot see it. Do you trust that? I am trying to. Rose nodded slowly. Maybe I will try too. They walked back to the wagon in companionable silence, and Pierce helped her into the back where they had arranged her bedroll for the night since they were near town and it felt safer than the tent. Pierce, Rose's voice came from the darkness. Will you tell me about your ranch? What it looks like, what you do there. So he did. He described the house his uncle had built, the barn and corrals, the way the land stretched out to meet the mountains. He told her about the cattle drives and the spring roundup, about the 2 horses he was training, about the quiet satisfaction of watching the sunset from his porch. It sounds wonderful, Rose said sleepily. I would like to see it someday. Pierce's heart jumped at that, but he kept his voice level. You would always be welcome. Would I? Yes. There was a pause, and then Rose said, I will miss you when this is over. I will miss talking to you like this. I will miss you too, Pierce admitted. Maybe I could write to you. Once I am settled, would that be all right? I would like that very much. Good. He could hear the smile in her voice. Then I will write. I will tell you all about my aunt's family in Sacramento and whatever happens next. I will look forward to those letters. They fell silent after that, but it was a comfortable silence, full of things unsaid but understood. Pierce lay awake long after he heard Rose's breathing even out in sleep, thinking about letters and loneliness and the way she had leaned against him by the fire. The 4th day brought them down into the Sacramento Valley. The change was dramatic. Instead of rocky desert and mountain forests, they now traveled through lush farmland. Fields of wheat and orchards stretched out on either side of the road, and the air smelled of growing things and rich earth. Rose sat up straighter, looking around with wide eyes. I remember this, she said. Not this exact place, but the way everything is so green. In Nevada and Virginia City, everything was brown or gray. I had forgotten what it was like to see this much green. It is pretty country, Pierce agreed. Different from what I am used to, but pretty. They stopped for lunch at a farm stand and bought fresh strawberries and cream, a treat that made Rose close her eyes in pleasure at the first bite. Pierce watched her and felt his chest tighten with longing. He wanted to give her more moments like this, wanted to see her happy and safe, wanted things he had no business wanting. Tomorrow, Rose said, as if reading his thoughts. We will reach Sacramento tomorrow, will we not? Yes. Probably by afternoon if we start early. I am terrified, she said simply. And excited. And sad. Sad. This journey will be over. I have been dreading it and looking forward to it at the same time, and now it is almost done and I am not ready for that. Pierce understood exactly what she meant. Whatever happens tomorrow, you will be all right. You are going to your family. That is a good thing. I know, but I will miss this. I will miss being on the road with you, just talking and traveling. It has been the happiest I have felt since my mother died. She looked at him. Does that sound strange? No. His voice was rough. It does not sound strange at all. That night they camped one last time. Pierce made a better dinner than usual, using supplies he had been saving. Steaks instead of bacon, fresh vegetables instead of canned beans, and he even had a bottle of wine he had brought for this final evening. They ate slowly, neither of them wanting the meal to end. The sun set, painting the valley in gold and purple light, and they sat close together on a blanket Pierce had spread on the ground. Pierce. Rose set down her tin cup and turned to face him. I need to tell you something. His heart started beating faster. What is it? I know tomorrow I will go to my aunt's house, and you will return to Nevada, and this will all be over. But I need you to know that these past days have meant more to me than I can say. You saved me. Not just by helping me find my family, but by showing me that there are still good people in the world, that I can trust again, that I can hope. Rose. Pierce reached out and took her hand. You did the same for me. I did not realize how lonely I had been until I met you. These days with you have reminded me what it feels like to care about someone, to want to be with someone. Then why does this feel like goodbye? Her eyes filled with tears. Why does it feel like I am losing something precious just when I found it? Because maybe you are. Maybe we both are. Pierce knew he should stop there, should pull back and let her go to her new life without complicating things. But he could not. Rose, I know this is not the right time, and I know you need to focus on your family and your future, but I have to say this. I have fallen in love with you. Rose sucked in a breath. Pierce, I do not expect anything from you. I just needed you to know. These feelings I have, they are real. You are not just someone I helped. You are someone I could imagine building a life with if circumstances were different. If circumstances were different, Rose repeated. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But they are not different. Tomorrow I go to my aunt and you go home, and that is how it has to be. I know. But Pierce, I have fallen in love with you too. Her voice broke. I tried not to. I told myself it was just gratitude, that I was confused and emotional. But it is not that. I love you. I love the way you listen when I talk, the way you make me feel safe, the way you believe in me when I do not believe in myself. I love you, and tomorrow I have to walk away from you. Pierce pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, burying her face against his chest. He held her while she cried, his own throat tight with emotion. What if you did not have to walk away? He said into her hair. What if there was another choice? Rose pulled back to look at him. What do you mean, come back to Nevada with me? After you meet your family, after you reconnect with them, come back. Be with me. We can build a life together. I cannot do that. I have to give my aunt a chance. I owe it to my mother's memory to see this through. I am not saying do not see it through. I am saying do not give up on us before we even have a chance to try. Rose pressed her hands to her face. I do not know what to do. A week ago, I had lost everything and had no hope. Now I have found my family and found you, and I feel like I have to choose. You do not have to choose tonight, Pierce said. Meet your family, spend time with them, get to know them, and then decide. If you want to stay in Sacramento, I will understand. But if you find that is not where you belong, you will always have a home with me. You would wait for me, as long as it takes. Rose searched his face, and then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and full of all the longing they both felt. Pierce kissed her back carefully, trying to put into the kiss everything he could not say with words. When they finally pulled apart, Rose said, I do not want to think about tomorrow yet. Can we just have tonight? Just this one night to be together without worrying about what comes next. Yes, Pierce said. We can have tonight. They lay back on the blanket and looked up at the stars, hands intertwined, talking about everything and nothing until the fire burned down and the night grew cold. Pierce wrapped his coat around Rose and she curled against him, her head on his shoulder. Whatever happens, she whispered, I will never forget this. I will never forget you. Neither will I, Pierce promised. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, stealing a few more hours before reality would force them apart. Morning came too soon. Pierce woke first and watched the sunrise, careful not to disturb Rose. When she finally stirred, he helped her up and they broke camp in near silence, both of them aware that this was the last time. The road to Sacramento was well traveled, and they joined the flow of wagons and riders heading into the city. As they got closer, the farms gave way to houses, then buildings, then the streets of the city itself. Sacramento was bustling and loud, so different from the quiet of the road. Rose gripped the wagon seat, her face pale, and Pierce wanted to turn the horses around and take her back to the quiet places where they had been happy. But he did not. He followed the directions he had been given to Riverside Drive, and soon they were traveling along a street lined with large houses. Trees arched overhead, and the neighborhood had an air of prosperity and permanence. "Number 247, Pierce said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of a handsome two-story house with a wide porch and well-tended gardens. Rose stared at the house. "That is it. That is where my aunt lives. Are you ready?" "No," she turned to him. "Pierce, I do not think I can do this." "Yes, you can. You have come all this way. You have survived losing your mother and traveling hundreds of miles and burning your only connection to this place. You can walk up to that door and knock. Will you come with me, if you want me to, please?" Pierce set the brake and helped Rose down from the wagon. Together they walked up the path to the front door. Rose's hand was ice-cold in his. She raised her fist to knock, then hesitated. "What if they do not remember me?" "They will remember. You are family." Rose knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps approached and the door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with graying red hair and kind eyes. She looked at Rose and her face went through a series of emotions: confusion, recognition, and then shock. "Mary's girl," she whispered. "Rose." "Is that you, Aunt Margaret?" Rose's voice shook. Margaret let out a cry and pulled Rose into her arms. "Oh my God, Rose, we thought you were dead. When we did not hear from your mother and then we got word about the influenza in Virginia City, we thought we had lost you both." Rose was crying too hard to answer. Margaret held her, rocking back and forth, and Pierce felt his own eyes sting watching them. Finally, Margaret pulled back and looked at Rose's face. "You are so grown up. The last time I saw you, you were a little girl. Come in, come inside. Henry." "Henry, come quickly." She pulled Rose into the house, and Pierce followed uncertainly. A man appeared from a side room, tall and graying, with spectacles and a serious expression that softened when he saw Rose. "This is Rose," Margaret said. "Mary's daughter. She is alive, Henry. She found us." "Good Lord," Henry said. He stepped forward and shook Rose's hand formally. "My dear, we have been so worried. Your mother wrote to us last fall and then we never heard anything more." "She died," Rose managed to say. "Right before we were supposed to come here. I have been in Nevada working. I burned the letter with your address, but Mr. Callahan helped me find you." She gestured to Pierce. Margaret turned to Pierce for the first time. "You brought her here?" "Yes, madam. I am Pierce Callahan. I have a ranch near Hawthorne, Nevada. Rose and I met a week ago, and when I heard her story, I offered to help." "Then we owe you an enormous debt," Henry said, shaking Pierce's hand firmly. "Please come in. You must stay for dinner at the very least." "I do not want to intrude." "Nonsense. You brought our niece back to us." "You will stay." Margaret was already calling for servants, ordering food and tea and making a fuss. The next few hours passed in a blur. Rose was introduced to her cousins. Charlotte, a pretty girl of 18 with her mother's red hair; William, a gangly 16-year-old; and Robert, a serious 13-year-old who stared at Rose with open curiosity. They were welcoming and excited, though clearly overwhelmed by Rose's sudden appearance. Pierce sat through dinner feeling increasingly out of place. This was Rose's world now, these prosperous people with their fine house and good manners. He was just a rancher from Nevada, and he did not belong here. Rose kept looking at him throughout the meal, her eyes pleading with him not to leave. But he knew he had to. This was her chance to reconnect with her family, and he would only be in the way. After dinner, Henry took Pierce aside. "Mr. Callahan, my wife and I would like to offer you payment for bringing Rose here. It was an extraordinary kindness." "I do not want payment," Pierce said. "I was glad to help. Nevertheless, you must have expenses. The telegraph fees alone and then the journey." "Please allow us to reimburse you." Pierce considered refusing, but he realized that might insult them. "The telegraph fees, then, that is all." Henry pressed money into his hand, more than Pierce had spent, but he did not argue. "Will you stay the night? We have plenty of room." "No, thank you. I need to start back." That was not entirely true, but Pierce could not stand the thought of sleeping under this roof while Rose settled into her new life without him. "Then at least let me put your horses up at the stable and give them feed." "That would be appreciated." Margaret found him in the hall. "Mr. Callahan, I cannot thank you enough for what you have done. Rose told me about the burned letter, about how hopeless she felt. You gave her back her family. She deserved that. May I ask you something?" Margaret's eyes were shrewd. "What is my niece to you?" Pierce hesitated. "A friend." "Is that all?" He met her gaze. "No, madam, that is not all, but it does not matter what my feelings are. Rose has a home here now with you. That is what matters." Margaret studied him for a long moment. "I see. Well, Mr. Callahan, I want you to know that Rose will always be welcome here. But she is also a grown woman, free to make her own choices. If her choice is you, we will not stand in her way." "I appreciate that, madam, but the choice has to be hers." "Indeed it does." Rose found him as he was preparing to leave. The sun was setting, and Pierce had stayed much longer than he intended. His horses were rested, and he had said his goodbyes to everyone except Rose. "You are leaving," she said. It was not a question. "I need to get back to the ranch. My hands have been managing things, but I have been gone almost a week. When will I see you again?" "That is up to you, Rose. You have my address. You can write to me. And if you decide you want to come back to Nevada, you know where to find me." "What if I want to come with you now?" Pierce's heart jumped, but he shook his head. "You need to give this a chance. You need time with your family. Do not make any big decisions today." "What if I already know what I want?" "Then it will still be true in a few weeks or a few months." "Rose, I meant what I said last night. I love you. But I will not be the reason you give up this chance. Stay here. Get to know your aunt and uncle and cousins. Let yourself have a real home for a while, and then, if you still want to be with me, I will be waiting." Tears streamed down Rose's face. "I do not want you to go. I know, but I have to." He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her one last time, trying to memorize the feel of her lips, the scent of her hair, everything about this moment. "Write to me," he whispered against her mouth. "I will. I promise I will. Goodbye, Rose. Goodbye, Pierce." He climbed onto the wagon and picked up the reins. Rose stood in front of her aunt's house, wrapped in the soft light of evening, watching him go. Pierce forced himself to turn away, to focus on the road ahead. The journey back to Nevada was the longest of his life. Pierce threw himself into work when he got back to the ranch. Spring roundup was starting, and there was plenty to keep him busy from dawn until dark. He worked until his muscles ached and he was too tired to think, but at night, lying in his bed, he thought about Rose. 2 weeks after he returned home, the first letter arrived. Pierce recognized her handwriting on the envelope immediately and tore it open. "Dear Pierce," she wrote, "I am settling in with my aunt and uncle. They have been wonderfully kind and my cousins are lovely. Charlotte and I have become quite close already. She has been teaching me about Sacramento society, and I have been telling her stories about Nevada and the mining towns. Aunt Margaret wants to enroll me in classes at a ladies' academy here, so I can improve my education. It is a generous offer, and I am considering it. The house is beautiful, and I have my own room with a view of the garden. Everything here is green and growing, so different from the desert. But Pierce, I miss you. I miss our talks and our evenings by the fire. I miss the way you look at me, like I am someone worth believing in. I hope the ranch is well and that the roundup is going smoothly. Please write back and tell me everything. Love, Rose. Pierce read the letter 3 times, then sat down and wrote a reply. He told her about the roundup, about the new calves and the horse he was training. He told her about Hawthorne and the people there who had asked after her. And he told her he missed her too every day. They wrote back and forth through the spring and into summer. Rose's letters were full of descriptions of her new life. The classes she was taking, the parties her aunt hosted, the trips to the theater. She sounded happy, and Pierce was glad for that, even as his heart ached, but she always ended each letter the same way. I miss you and love, Rose. Summer turned to fall, and Rose's letters began to change. She wrote less about society events and more about feeling restless, about not quite fitting in with her aunt's world. She mentioned several young men her aunt had introduced her to, hoping Pierce would be jealous, though she always added that none of them interested her. Pierce wrote back honestly. He told her that if she was happy in Sacramento, she should stay. But if she was not, she knew where to find him. In October, almost 6 months after Pierce had left Rose in Sacramento, he was mending a fence when one of his ranch hands called out to him. "Boss, someone is coming up the road." Pierce looked up and saw a wagon approaching. As it got closer, his heart started to pound. He knew that figure, even at a distance. Rose. He dropped his tools and walked toward the wagon, then ran. Rose pulled the horses to a stop and climbed down before he reached her, and then she was in his arms and he was spinning her around, and they were both laughing and crying at the same time. "You came back," he said, setting her down but not letting go. "I came home," Rose corrected. She looked up at him with shining eyes. "Pierce, I tried. I really tried to make a life in Sacramento. My aunt and uncle were wonderful and I loved them, but it was not my home. Every day I missed you more. I missed the desert and the mountains and the open sky. I missed this." She gestured to the ranch spread out around them. "My aunt said I should follow my heart. She said life is too short to live it for anyone else. So here I am if you still want me." "If I still want you," Pierce kissed her, long and deep and full of 6 months of longing. "Rose, I have wanted you every single day since I left Sacramento. I love you. I want to marry you and build a life with you right here on this ranch." "Yes," Rose said, kissing him back. "Yes to all of it. Yes to you and to this place and to us. You are sure you are giving up a lot to be here. I am not giving up anything. I am choosing what I want, and I want you, Pierce Callahan. I want this life with you." Pierce held her close, his heart so full he thought it might burst. Around them, the Nevada desert stretched out in all directions, vast and beautiful and home. The ranch house stood solid behind them, waiting to be filled with love and laughter and the life they would build together. "Welcome home, Rose," he whispered. "I am home," she agreed. Finally. They were married in November in the small church in Hawthorne. Margaret and Henry came from Sacramento with all 3 of their children. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house attended, along with most of the town. It was a simple ceremony, but to Pierce and Rose, it was perfect. Rose moved into the ranch house and immediately began making it a home. She planted a garden and filled the rooms with curtains and rugs, and the kind of warmth the house had been missing for years. Pierce's ranch hands were initially wary of having a woman around, but Rose won them over quickly with her kindness and her willingness to work. The first winter was hard, as Nevada winters always were at that elevation. But Rose did not complain. She seemed to thrive on the challenge, learning to manage the household and even helping Pierce with the horses when the weather permitted. In the spring, they received news that Margaret had written a letter to Rose's mother's grave marker in Virginia City, telling her sister that Rose was married and happy. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to Rose. "My mother would have liked you," she told Pierce one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "She would have approved of this life. I wish I could have met her. So do I. But in a way, she brought us together. If she had not saved all that money, if she had not planned to go to Sacramento, none of this would have happened." Pierce put his arm around her. "Then I am grateful to her, and I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you are happy." "You already do," Rose said, leaning into him. The years passed quickly. Pierce's ranch prospered, and he was able to expand his holdings and improve his herd. Rose's garden grew larger each year, and she became known throughout the area for her vegetables and her hospitality. 2 years after they married, their first child was born, a son they named Henry after Rose's uncle. Pierce held the tiny baby in his arms and felt a love so fierce it took his breath away. "He is perfect," Rose said from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "He looks like you," Pierce said. "He has your chin." They laughed together and Pierce leaned down to kiss his wife. "Thank you," he said, "for coming back, for choosing this life, for giving me a family." "Thank you for finding me when I was lost," Rose replied, "for believing in me, for loving me." Little Henry grew into a sturdy toddler with his mother's blonde hair and his father's serious eyes. When he was 2, Rose gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret, after Rose's aunt. 2 years later came another son, James, and 2 years after that, a second daughter they called Charlotte. The ranch house that had been so quiet and lonely when Pierce lived there alone now rang with children's laughter and the sounds of a busy household. Rose managed it all with grace, raising their children to be kind and hardworking, teaching them to love the land and respect the life they had been given. Margaret and Henry visited from Sacramento every year, and Charlotte often spent her summers at the ranch. She eventually married a lawyer in Sacramento, but she always said some of her happiest memories were of those summers in Nevada, riding horses and helping Rose with the garden. Pierce and Rose made a trip to Virginia City when their oldest was 5. They visited Mary Parker's grave and left flowers. Rose cried a little, but they were healing tears, tears of closure and peace. "I wish you could have seen this, Mama," Rose whispered to the stone. "I wish you could have met Pierce and the children, but I think you would be proud of me. I think you would be happy that I found my way home after all." On the way back to Hawthorne, Pierce held Rose's hand. "You are amazing, you know that. Everything you survived, everything you built. I am in awe of you. We built it together," Rose said. "I could not have done any of this without you. We make a good team, the best team." As their children grew, Pierce taught them everything he knew about ranching. Henry, the oldest, took to it naturally and showed signs of being an even better rancher than his father. Margaret preferred the horses, spending hours training and riding them. James loved the land itself, studying the plants and animals with a scientist's curiosity. And little Charlotte, the baby, loved everyone and everything, her joy infectious. Rose continued her education, borrowing books from the small library in Hawthorne and teaching herself subjects she had never had the chance to learn. She taught the children their lessons before they were old enough to attend the school in town, and she encouraged all of them to pursue their interests and dreams. "Your grandmother never got to achieve her dreams," she told them. "She worked so hard so that I could have opportunities. And I have those opportunities, and I want you to have them too. Never waste the chances you are given." The children listened and learned, growing up with a strong sense of family and purpose. Pierce watched his wife over the years and fell more in love with her with each passing day. She aged beautifully, her face gaining character and her strength only growing. On their 10th wedding anniversary, he gave her a locket with a picture of all 6 of them inside. "So you will always have your family close to your heart," he said. Rose cried and kissed him. "I already carry you all in my heart, but this is beautiful, thank you. Rose, these 10 years have been the happiest of my life. I wake up every morning grateful that you came back to me." "I would choose you again and again," Rose said. "In every life, in every circumstance, I would always choose you." They renewed their vows in front of their children and friends, promising again to love and cherish each other for as long as they lived. It was a simple ceremony, but the love between them was so evident that there was not a dry eye in the church. The ranch continued to thrive. Pierce's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher spread throughout Nevada, and people came from neighboring counties to buy his cattle and horses. Rose's garden became legendary, and she often shared her produce with neighbors and friends. Together, they built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy. When Henry, their oldest, turned 18, Pierce offered to make him a partner in the ranch. "This will be yours someday," he told his son. "I want you to start learning how to run it now." Henry accepted gratefully, and father and son worked side by side, planning for the future. Margaret announced she wanted to train horses professionally, and Pierce built her a proper training arena. James went off to study at a university in California, promising to come back and help improve the ranch's land management. Charlotte, still young, talked about becoming a teacher like her mother had once dreamed of being. Rose and Pierce sat on their porch one evening, watching their children and feeling the satisfaction of a life well lived. "You ever think about that day behind the barn?" Rose asked. "When you found me crying over the burned letter?" "I think about it often," Pierce said. "It was the luckiest day of my life. I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything. You had lost a lot, but you had not lost yourself. That is what I saw that day, a woman who was broken but not defeated. And you helped me find my way home." "You found your way home," Pierce corrected. "I just walked beside you for part of the journey." Rose smiled and took his hand. "No, Pierce, you were not just walking beside me. You became my home. This ranch, this life, you and our children, this is what home means to me. Not Sacramento, not my aunt's house, not any place. Home is wherever you are." Pierce pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Then we are both home." They sat together as the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The ranch spread out before them, built on love and hard work and faith. Their children's laughter drifted from the house, and the evening breeze carried the scent of Rose's garden. It had been more than 20 years since Pierce had found a crying woman behind his barn, 20 years since Rose had burned the letter that was supposed to be her only way home. But that burned letter had led them both to something far better than either had imagined. Rose had found her family again, reconnected with her past, and built a future beyond her wildest dreams. Pierce had found love and family, filling the lonely spaces in his life with joy and purpose. Their story could have ended in so many other ways. Rose could have stayed in Sacramento, living a comfortable life with her aunt. Pierce could have delivered her and returned to his solitary existence, never knowing what he was missing. But instead, they had both been brave enough to choose love, to take a risk on something uncertain but beautiful. And it had been worth it. Every hardship, every moment of doubt, every challenge they had faced together had only made them stronger. Their love had grown deeper with each passing year, weathering the storms of life and emerging more resilient. Now, In the golden years of their life together, they could look back with no regrets. They had built something lasting, something that would continue beyond them in their children and grandchildren, and the legacy they left behind. "I love you," Rose whispered as the last light faded from the sky. "I love you too," Pierce replied, "always and forever." And as the stars came out over the Nevada desert, illuminating the vast sky above their home, Pierce and Rose Callahan sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had raised, and the love that had guided them through it all. The burned letter had been Rose's only way home, or so she had thought. But in the end, it had led her to something far more precious than an address in Sacramento. It had led her to Pierce, to the ranch, to a life of love and purpose and belonging. Home, they both knew now, was not a place you found on a map or an address written on paper. Home was the person you loved, the life you built together, and the memories you created along the way. And they had found it, against all odds, in the wild Nevada desert where a rancher had stopped to help a crying woman, and two lost souls had found each other at exactly the right moment. Their story was complete. The threads that had unraveled when Rose's mother died, when the letter burned, when everything seemed lost, had been rewoven into something beautiful and strong. They had taken the broken pieces of their lives and created something whole. As Pierce and Rose eventually rose from the porch and went inside to their family, to the warmth and light of their home, they carried with them the knowledge that they had been blessed beyond measure. They had found what everyone searches for: true love, a place to belong, and a life worth living. And it had all started with a burned letter and a rancher who cared enough to stop and help a woman in need. From that single moment of kindness had grown a love story that would be told for generations, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and choosing to believe in second chances. The end.